Welcome to the video. Here we'll be solving some trigonometric problems related to half-angle formulas. So here we have three half-angle formula. Sine u by 2 equals to plus minus some expression, cosine u by 2 equals to plus minus square root some expression, and tan u by 2 has three versions of the formula. So before we start solving problem, we need to talk about the formulas here. Uh, the symbol plus minus does not mean that there are exactly two values each time. It means that we must choose the appropriate sign for the problem given. So if we start solving with the type 1 problem, finding the exact value, for example, if we want to find the exact value of tan 5 pi over 8, then we can literally use any of the half angle formulas for tangent, meaning I can use the first one, or I could use the second version, or I could use the third version. For simplicity, we should use the later two versions, any of the two versions. So for this, I'll be using uh, tan u by 2 equals to sine u over 1 plus cosine u. We could also use the second version, the third version, tan u by 2 equals to 1 minus cosine u all over sine u. We can do that. However, here we must compare this u by 2 with the given angle 5 pi over 8. So if we equate those two, u by 2 equals to 5 pi over 8. Then if we multiply both sides by 2, u by 2 times 2 equals to 5 pi over 4 times 2. We get u equals to I did a typing mistake here, it's 8. We get u equals to 5 pi over 4. So 5 pi over 4 is in quadrant 3. Now tan 5 pi over 8 equals to, this is our u by 2, this equals to uh, sine u is 5 pi by 4 over 1 plus cosine 5 pi over 4. To find the values of sine 5 pi over 4 and cosine 5 pi over 4, we use the unit circle. So if this is the first pi over 4, I mean 1 pi over 4, 2 pi over 4, if I take another line here, 3 pi by 4, 4 pi over 4, and 5 pi over 4. So it's in the third quadrant. The coordinate here is root 2 over 2, comma, root 2 over 2. And the unit circle, using the symmetric property, the coordinate here will be negative root 2 over 2, comma, negative root 2 over 2. So in this ordered pair, the first element represents the value of cosine function, and the second element represents the value of sine function. So if we substitute the values of sine pi over 4 and cosine pi over 4 right here, we get the value of tan 5 pi over 8. So sine pi over 4 is negative root 2 over 2 all over 1 plus cosine 5 pi over 4 is negative root 2 over 2. We have done the major part of the problem, thus we have to simplify this expression. So we can write that as negative 2 over 2, 2 over 2 minus root 2 over 2, and then negative root 2 over 2 all over 2 minus root 2 over 2. And then we can cancel this 2 from both numerator and denominator, and then we are left with negative root 2 over 2 minus root 2. We can leave our answer right here like this, but we can also simplify further. How do you do that? So if we multiply both the numerator and the denominator by the conjugate of the denominator, we get the more simplified result, root 2 over 2 negative root 2, and the conjugate of the denominator is the same thing except the sign inside is positive, 2 plus root 2. Now if we multiply this negative root 2 with 2 and positive root 2, we get negative 2 root 2 negative root 2 times root 2 gives us 2, and here in the denominator, if we use the FOIL rule, we get 2 times 2, 4, and root 2 times root 2, 2. So then we are left with negative 2 root 2 minus 2 all over 2. We can do further simplification. If we factor out 2, then we have negative root 2 minus 1 over 2, and then we can cancel this 2. Then we are left with negative root 2 minus 1, and that's the final answer. So tan 5 pi over 8 equals to negative root 2 minus 1. Let's solve one more problem. Problem 2, find the value of cosine 5 pi over 8. So for cosine and sine function, we need to think about the plus minus sign. So we determine the sign based on the quadrant in which u by 2 lies. We need to think about the plus minus sign. We determine the sign based on the quadrant in which u by 2 lies. Okay, so sorry. So here u by 2 equals to, again, 5 pi over 8, which implies u equals to 5 pi over 4, and we know this is in quadrant 3. So u is in quadrant 3, or in degree version u is 225. Therefore u by 2, that means 5 pi over 8, this is equivalent to 125, not 125, it's 112.5 degrees. This is equivalent to 112.5, and this is quadrant, quadrant 2. So our u by 2 is in quadrant 2. So in quadrant 2, cosine is negative. So we will use the negative version of the formula. We know cosine u by 2 equals to plus minus 1 plus cosine u over 2. So we should pick the negative sign for our current problem. So cosine u by 2 equals to negative square root of 1 plus cosine u over 2. So if we apply this formula to our current problem, cosine pi over 8 equals to minus square root of 1 plus cosine pi over 4 all over 2 equals to minus 1 plus negative root 2 over 2 square root all over 2. So the square root extends to, oops, let me rewrite this expression. Then minus 1 can be written as 2 over 2 minus root 2 over 2 all over 2 square root. This equals to 2 minus root 2 over 2 times 1/2, and that equals to 2 minus root 2 over 4 equals to 2 minus root 2 over 2. So that's the answer for cosine pi over 8. The third problem, find the exact value of sine pi over 12. So look at the angle here, pi over 12. We already know the angle pi over 6, which is 30 degree, and now we have the angle pi over 12, which is definitely less than 30 degree. So it's definitely in the first quadrant, and in the first quadrant every trigonometric functions is positive. So we can use the positive version of sine u by 2 formula. Sine u by 2 equals to positive 1 minus cosine u over 2 square root. Now, how do we find out our u? So u by 2 equals to pi over 12. If we multiply both sides by 2, we get u equals to pi over 6. Then sine pi over 12 equals to 1 minus cosine pi over 6 all over 2 square root. And the value of cosine pi over 6 is root 3 by 2. 1 minus root 3 by 2 all over 2 square root. Now, if you are struggling with how did I get root 3 by 2, we can take help from the unit circle. If this is the unit circle, pi over 6 is somewhere here, and the coordinate here is root 3 by 2 comma 1/2. So the first part here represents the value of cosine. The first part of the ordered pair represents the value of cosine function. So now it's time to just simplify this expression right here. So we can write 2 over 2 minus root 3 over 2 all over 2 square root, and this equals to 2 minus root 3 all over 2 times 1 over 2 square root equals to 2 minus root 3 square root all over 2. And that's the end of the problem. I hope this helps. Thank you so much for watching.